What's up, everyone? I wanted to recover something that I covered before. It's called ciphers. Okay, now this is like high Jesuit language. Like a lot of people, they know about the signs and symbolism. So they look for a lot of signs and symbolism within the world. Now they've woken up. So they see a lot of things that they didn't see before that has been hidden in plain sight. But then this is ciphers, like I've explained, and it's high Jesuit language, which means that these are the ones that only certain people would notice if it was put out. Now, what you're looking at right now, obviously, is our logo at the top, but at the bottom, see, this is how the alphabet structure lays out. So, what I'm going to do, I'm going to basically go through the whole alphabet with you so you'll be able to understand how you can put words together and how each word is represented when it's put out there as symbolism. Okay, so this will be easier for you all to understand. So I hope that you have a pen and paper because you might need one, because the other video I'd done, I was told that there wasn't enough. It was done too quickly, so it was hard for people to understand. So this way, I go through each letter of the alphabet so everybody can understand exactly what letter means what. So then you can create your own words, or you can see what words that they're creating in order for you to work out what the message is that's being projected out there. But there is something I want to cover beforehand. Earlier in the chat group, I posted a little segment, and it was Dan Brown, The Lost Symbol. Now, he's the author, the best-selling author of the Da Vinci Code. Now, what it was, I decoded the message that were in the book. Okay, but it turns out it's not a real message because, well, to me, it don't make no sense. Okay, but I did make an error in the message, and somebody in the chat group corrected me. So I want to say thank you for the correction, because I've obviously written it down very quickly and I made a mistake. Okay, see, so I make some mistakes. All right, now the mistake I made was, if you look at the top end, the first letter going across, I put an N, and what I should have put was a 0. Okay, because that letter, which looks like an E on the right hand side, actually represents a 0 in the cipher world when you're decoding the letters, you know, because as you can see, where they're going further down, the N is actually represented by the circle and the dot in the middle, because that's what the N is, which means that the N can't be next to the S at the top. So, you know, thank you for that correction, and you'll be able to see where the mistake is. But what I'm going to do, just read a little segment from the Da Vinci Code, only because, right, on the Da Vinci Code, this is where I try to decode it to find out what happened, okay? And in the Da Vinci Code, on that page where that symbolism was, it says, they're not icons, land and fort. They're symbols. The language was one he had recognized immediately, an encrypted cipher language from the 17th century. Langdon knew very well how to break it. Ma'am, he said, feeling hesitant, this pyramid is Peter's private property. And then it goes into stuff, but it doesn't break down code, okay, in the book. So I just thought I'd break it down. And to me, like you just seen just now, it don't make no sense. But then it could be they have to jumble up words, you know, and then make a full message, you know. But I ain't done that. So if somebody want to do that and send it, then I push it on the channel, because currently the list you're seeing, it don't makes no sense, okay. Now, what you're seeing here now, this is the alphabet of the ciphers, okay. So as you can see, A is represented as a backwards L. Then we got the letter B, that's a U. Then we have letter C, that's a L. Then we have the letter D, that's a backwards C. Then we have the letter E, which is a 0, okay? The 0 without the dot, which is the N. Then we have F. F is represented as C. Then we have G, which is represented as number 7. You know, conveniently is a number 7. You know, this is the language of the Jesuits. You know, number 7, important, you know, which you've all understood because we've broken this down many times in our other videos, the importance of the number 7. Okay, then we go over to the H. The H is upside down U. Then we go over to the I, which is a backward 7. Then we go to the J, which is an L and a dot. Now the dots are important, you know, which you'll see later on when words get broken down, depending where the dots are supposed to be. You know, I explain that in the next segment. Okay, so we got a K, which is a dot in the middle. We have a L, dot, you know, M. As you can see, you know, I don't know whether you need me to go through the whole alphabet. I might as well know, innit? You know, we have an N, which is a circle with a dot in the middle. We have a 0, which is a C and a dot. We have a P, which is a 7 backwards with a dot. Okay, then we have the Q, which is a U upside down with a dot. Then we have the R, which is a 7 twisted upon its side, you know, the opposite direction, and have a dot. And then we have the S, which is represented as a V. And then we have the T, which is represented as a V on its side. And then we have a U, which is a V on its opposite side. And then we have the V, which is represented in the opposite way to a normal V. And then we have the W, which is a V with a dot in the middle. And then we have the X, which is represented as an arrow on its side, you know, the dot in the middle. And then we have the Y with an arrow in the opposite direction with a dot in the middle. And then we have the Z with a arrow going up with a dot in the center. Okay, now this is important because where these dots are placed, see, it represents different things. You know, because as you've seen from the first cipher, it was just a load of letters all mixed up. And this is where I wrote everything down, and I obviously made that mistake because I'd represented the N. I'd represented the C with a dot as an N when I should have represented it as a 0. You know, and this is where it's important where the dots are placed. So I have another image which will be able to explain to you, you know, why we have to place the dots where we have to place them. You know, because a cipher is a simple diagram. It's just when it's all laid out, unless you can see the table, it would be hard for somebody to break things down. You know, right here now, this is the table. Okay, and as you can see, you got A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, and then when we get over to the J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, now you notice you're starting to see dots, okay? And then when we get down to the S, T, U, V, you notice there ain't no dots there, but then when we get to the W, X, Y, Z, the dots appear again, and it's significant into the places where the dots appear. You know, this is the importance, and this is where obviously you don't make a mistake, you know, because mistakes do happen, right? But, you know, that's what it is. So I'm going to go, it'll move over in a second, you know, to our official one, because, you know, we put it as an official logo. And the reason I put the official logo is to help with the memory, you know, because when you keep see something all the time, okay, it stays fixed in your memory, so it'll help you remember the ciphers. And it's important that people learn about the ciphers, you know, if they get out of the sign and symbolism part, you know, this is like a next level. So this is ours, you know, I've done a logo, you know, so I can remember. And this is what you can see here. So I'm going to explain to you how it works. Right, how it works now. Well, we got the letter A, right? What we're going to do, we're just going to take that L, you know, the L where we have the boxes that cross in the middle, you know. So we just take the L. So L is represented, L back to front is represented as the letter A. Now, if you want to use the letter B, that's all you do now. You use the U that's next to it. So then the box that's holding the B in, that's all we use as the letter B. And then when we get to the letter C, now we're going to represent that as the letter L, which is what's left in the box. And then we'll move down to the letter D, right? But when I get down to the letter D now I have to incorporate the bottom part of the letter A, okay? And then I'm going to come down the side, and then I go underneath the letter D. And then what that would give me is a back to front C. And then I'll move over to the letter E, and because that is in the center, I will represent that as a circle, okay? Well, as a square, okay? It's not a circle, it's a square. So I represent that as a square. And then I will move over to the letter F, and I will represent the letter F as a C. Okay, we're moving on to the letter G. I will reverse that, and I will make that a backward 7, as you can see in the image here on the picture. and then I'll move over to the letter H, and then what I'll do, I put a hood on the letter H, because what's left of the letter H, see, you go up from the side of the G, you go across from the bottom of the E, and then we'll come down on the side of the H, okay? So that's all I'm going to use as the housing of that, and then now it'll be represented as my letter H, and then I will move over to the letter I. Now I'm going to represent the letter I, okay, as 7, but reversed the other way, because as you can see in this image here, the letter I goes up on the side of the H, and then it goes underneath the F. So this is where I get my back to front number 7. Okay, now let's move over to the J's. It gets a little bit more complicated, and the reason it gets complicated because now we're incorporating the dots. Okay, now the dots important, like I said, placement, you know, where the dots are placed. Okay, so you're moving over to letter J, and what you can see, we got the back to front L again, like how we had with the letter A. But the only difference is now we have a dot. Now the dot is placed right up in the corner, okay? So if you was to represent the letter J, what you would do is the L, like that, which is back to front, and then you will put a dot right up in the corner, okay? It have to go in the corner. You can't put it up the top on the side. It needs to go in the corner, because if it goes at the top, it represents a different letter, which I will get to, okay? So then we get down to the letter K. Now with K, what you can see, we got the umbrella, which is what we had with B, which is like the cup holding you. But then what we have in the center of the cup holding you, we have a dot, okay? Now the dot we have, that representing the letter K. So that's why we put it in the middle, okay? Because it's holding up the K, so the dot has to go in the middle. Because if it wasn't holding up the K with the dot in the middle, it would represent, like I just explained, the letter B. Okay, so you move over to letter L. Now L, what's left of the L? We're coming down from the side of the K and we're going underneath the L, which means we got the letter L. Okay, but we can't just have the letter L for the letter L. That would make no sense, innit? What we ciphering. So what we do is see we put a dot in the corner, but then what you notice compared to the other L on the opposite side, the dot is in a different corner. You know, the dot not on the right side now, the dot on the left side. Okay, so that represents the L. And then we move over to the letter M. Now the letter M now, as you can see, we're going to go underneath the J, we're going to come down the side of the M, and then we're going to go underneath the M, we're going to scoop it up, okay? And then what we're going to do, we're going to add dot in the middle, okay? Well, not in the middle, we're going to add the dot on side, okay? Now closest to the wall, which means that it is center, right? But it's not center place where is in the middle of the M, you know, a center place on the wall, which you can see, which goes around, which represent the letter C back to front, okay? And then we move over to the letter N. Now the letter N, as you can see, the circle is perfectly placed, okay, right up in the center, in the middle. So now we got the box, which is the square, and then we got a dot in the middle. So every time we see a box and we see a dot in the middle, is a square box with a dot in the middle, that represents in cipher language the letter N, okay? And then we move over to the letter O. When we get to the letter O, we're just going to use it like a C. So we'll have a C, okay? And then what we'll do, we'll put the dot in the bottom corner, okay? Now, why you want the dot in the bottom corner is because you have to move it around. Because if you didn't have a dot, you know, like I explained before, where we go over to F, if you flip back over, you would have the same letter. So this is where the confusion will come with the language. So you need the dot, okay? Now we move down to the letter P. Okay, now P will be represented as a backward 7. But what we're going to do, we're going to put a little dot and we're going to put it right up top corner. Okay, so that will be a number 7, which is a 7 with a dot. Now that will be represented as the letter P. Then move over to the letter Q. Now what you're going to do, you're going to have an umbrella. So the Q is going to go up the side of the P, it's going to go underneath the letter N, and it will come down the side, okay, of the Q. So we're going to be like an umbrella over the letter Q. So with your umbrella now, what you're going to do, you're going to put a dot at the top, okay? So I can represent that as the letter Q. So I know now if I see an umbrella going up, you know, and have a dot at the top, it's going to be Q, it's not going to be H. Now, if the umbrella go up and there ain't no dot, it's going to be represented as the letter H. Now, moving over to the letter R, okay? Now, as you can see, the letter R now, it go represented as a reversed 7, okay, which is the same as you flip over to the I, that's a reverse 7, but the only difference is we have the dot. Now the dot is placed up in the top corner, okay? Now the top corner, that's what separates the I from the R, okay, because we have the dot. Now start getting a bit more complicated? Well, not really. Not really. I hope you're following. Okay, I hope you're following. Right, because it's Jesuit language, man. Right, but I learned this long time ago, and a lot of people don't understand this. But it's important for people to understand this. Like I said, once you move on from symbolism, you want to level up to a bit more language. Other things are hidden. Then this is the language you need to learn, okay? This is the language that they're teaching people above 33 degrees, okay? Below that, they're just teaching you sign and symbolism, and even that, not full truth, okay? Because if you decipher through to understand the extra knowledge. Now, this was explained in Morals and Dogma, that they give you signs and symbolism, and they want you to assume you understand the meaning. But really you don't. And this is where you have to look deeper, explain our Morals and Dogma. So it's a book that I recommend people go seek out, is that learn the teachings, okay, and the dogma that they put in there, which tells you that they don't tell people nothing, if for you to seek deeper to find out, they want you to assume, Right, let's get down to the letter S. What's happening with S? Okay, as you can see, the letter S, right, look like I got a V going on underneath it, okay? Forget about the little cross in the middle of both of them, okay? That was just to join everything, where I've done the line across, because I needed the lines, okay, to represent what I'm trying to show you now. Just make its own little cross in the middle. So just omit the cross, okay? So what we're looking at is the letter S, and that's all it is a V. Okay, so when you want to do a letter S, you do a letter V. Now, when we move down to the letter T, if you can see now, the letter T look like it have a half a triangle, I suppose, pointing towards my little X I was just talking about. Okay, so we've got a triangle on the side. Okay, like I say, forget about the middle and the bit. It's just a straight triangle on the side that represents the letter T. Okay, and then when we get to the letter U, as you can see, U now is facing towards the T. Okay, so U facing towards the T, open like that, that would represent the letter U. Now we've got no dots or anything. So we get down to the letter V, and then when we get down to the letter V, as you can see, it's just the same symbolism. Okay, so it's a half a triangle and it's pointing upwards. So that represents the letter V. Okay, now we move over to the letter W, and then we get into the complication like we did at the top. But by now, you should understand the dots. So let's go through the dots to the bottom. Right, we want to represent the letter W. So what we do a V, and then we do a dot at the bottom of the V. Okay, so that's where we do our dots. So that would represent the letter W and not the letter S, because S is a V without the dot. Okay, and then we get to W. Okay. Oh no, I just done W. X. Okay, let's get to X. Okay, so X is basically the V on its side pointing towards the center, and then what we would do, we would put a little dot right up in the corner, okay, at the point, and then that would represent the letter X. Now, if you want to represent the letter T, you would do the same V on its side, but you would omit the dot, okay, and then that would represent the letter T. Okay, so moving on to the letter Y. Y is obviously the reverse of that. So we have a letter V on its side pointing towards the center. And then what we would do, we put the dot on the opposite side. Okay, so that would represent the letter Y. Now, if you omit the dot, then you would represent the letter U. And then the final one that we have would be Z. So when you look at the letter Z, then what you'll see is that you have a V and then it points upwards. And then what I've done, I've put the dot right at the top. So then what that dot right at the top would represent is the letter Z. Okay, now you omit the dot at the top, and then we have the letter V. Okay. So that's how you work out the ciphers. So whatever sign and symbolism that you see with all them letters on the side, the little dots here and there, and it appears like just random gobbledygook, that's what they want you to think, innit? But now, hopefully, I've educated you and leveled you up to how to understand ciphers. And hopefully, I said everything nice and slow compared to the last time when I explained all this, which probably took me about 5 minutes. So, people couldn't really grasp everything. So I done it nice and slow. So you went through every letter, and now you'll be able to decipher for yourselves. So, one love everybody.